Hi, everyone. Welcome to this live stream webinar about Swimm AI. I'm very happy to be with you today. My name is Omer. I'm one of the co-founders here at Swimm and the CTO. And with us is also Hook, my dog, who happens to be the chief dog of the company. So he's also with us. So today we're going to talk about Swimm AI and its launch. And specifically, we're going to provide an overview of the features we've launched. We'll dive deep into two main features, one about creating documents. So actually two features there, AI suggestions and PR to doc. I'll explain each one when we get to them. We'll then talk about how we use AI to find documentations when you need the most using doc rules. And we will also answer frequently asked questions and address issues such as privacy. And we'll also talk about what we plan on doing ahead with Swimm AI. So let's get started. First of all, you'll notice that Swimm AI is an opt-in feature. So in order to enable it, you can go to your integration and settings for the repository you want to toggle it on. And then you select Generative AI and you toggle the switch here for Generative AI. Then what do we have? So in general, in Swimm, we have three main value propositions. One is helping you create docs, so making documentation easy to create. The second is to make it easy to maintain, that is, keep up to date as the code evolves. And third, easy to find, so you find the documentation when you need it most. So for easy to create, this is one of the things we got most requests for using Gen AI with. So many people talk to us and said, we want to use generative AI to help us create documentation in an easier fashion. So to do that, we actually included four things. We're going to elaborate on two today. One is AI suggestions, basically suggesting code document structures and also specific content parts, as I will show in a moment. Another feature is turning your pull requests into documents. We also introduced a generate description feature. That is, you select a snippet that you added to Swimm. So one of the things people do very frequently with Swimm is embed code snippets, parts of the code within the document, and then you could automatically generate a description for a specific snippet or a bunch of snippets, and you can make it better. So we know from many developers that writing is not their favorite task, especially if you're not a native speaker of English. So you might not feel as comfortable writing in English, especially when it comes to technical terms and technical writing, such as code documentation. So with AI, you can write something and then make it better. And we have a few options for that: make it shorter, make it longer, make it better, check for spelling mistakes, stuff like that, to make sure you focus on the really important thing, which is getting the knowledge that you have in your head onto the document rather than focus on the writing aspect of it. So this is all under the easy to create. For easy to maintain, we haven't introduced generative AI into it because we have our own algorithm called AutoSync that we put a lot of time and effort into. And basically what we do with AutoSync is you select code elements, snippets, tokens, paths, or other elements from your code, and you couple those code elements with some description. We then analyze the changes you make to your code. It could be from GitHub, for example, as part of the CI with our GitHub application. It could be from the IDE, VS Code or JetBrains if you use one of our plugins. And then we track the changes introduced to the code and validate that the documents are still up to date with the code after the code is changed. If relevant code parts changed, we either automatically suggest updates to the documentation, or we tell you there has been a breaking change, a big change. You might need to take a look and modify the document yourself and do it as part, say, of the pull request while all the information is still fresh in your mind. So for easy to maintain, we still use the same AutoSync we have been using at Swimm. And third, easy to find, we introduced a new feature called doc rules that I'll elaborate on later. It has a manual part, that is, you can create rules without using Swimm AI, and you can create rules using Swimm AI as well. So I'll show both ways. So To start with the first feature, we'll talk about AI suggestions. And the idea here is to help you get started and also interact with you while you write the document. So you'll see here as an example, I'm writing a document in Swimm and I'm providing a title. The title here is how we use Stripe. So at this point, you could click on the AI icon and get suggestions for different sections for the document. So you can see a bunch of different suggestions here, like Stripe wrapper module, creating a Stripe account, and other relevant sections. You could then choose the sections that are relevant for you. Obviously, you might have a wrapper module and another company might not. Once you do, you'll see we suggest content, and also we ask you to add code elements like a snippet. Once you added your own elements, it could be snippets, it could be additional text that you write yourself, the AI suggestions are updated, so they adapt to what you do. For example, now you can see a suggestion regarding retrieving Stripe product ID. And in this case, the suggestion also includes tokens and paths from your code base. What you saw just now is also how we use improve with AI to improve the language of some of the text. So again, you start with the title, you get some suggestions, you add your own text, your own snippets, you edit the suggestions provided by Swimm AI, and then Swimm AI provides better, more specific suggestions for your use case. A few best practices on how to use AI suggestions successfully. So, as I mentioned, suggestions adapt based on context. So if you provide code elements such as snippets, tokens, or paths, it will help improve the suggestions and make them more relevant for you. Similarly, if you write text yourself, so you add an explanation, the suggestions might also improve based on that. So the more context you add, the more context the AI model has to generate better suggestions for you. Another thing to understand is that it's an interactive process. So we could generate a full document for you based on a title, but from testing with many users, we saw that the best results come from combining what you as a human know about the code and no one else knows, and what AI can do to understand from the code and combine those together. So the idea is that, again, you get some suggestions, you write your own things, you add your own insights, then AI makes some suggestions, maybe suggests to rephrase something, maybe suggests another paragraph that you might not have thought of, but you should have. And then you continue writing, and the end is a really good document that is an outcome of this interactive process. And one more thing to note is that suggestions are for you to choose and modify. It's not supposed to be a drag and drop, and this is a final document. Again, you're the secret ingredient, you know your code best and the motivation behind the code, why you did things the way they were implemented. So what we encourage you to do is to pick the relevant suggestions that you get. Not all of them might be relevant for you, and then make them better, either with Swimm AI or yourself by adding and modifying it. And of course, add things that are not covered by the suggestions, like your own knowledge. So this was AI suggestions. Another feature, which we call PR2Doc, relies on an intuition we've had for a while and has already been included in Swimm, that some pull requests tell a good story. For example, in a pull request, you might introduce a lot of changes that together are a new feature or a bug fix. And that intuition can then help you create a document based on all the changes in the specific pull request. So for example, here you will see a pull request that was opened in Swimm last week. And if you look at the changes, they look like that, right? You have what you removed and what you added. If you go to Swimm and create from a pull request, you could then either select the pull request from the list or provide the number. And when you click on Create with AI, Swimm generates a document from those changes in the pull request. So what we do here is we take all the changes you introduced in this pull request with additional data we might have using static analysis and other tools, and then we send them to the generative AI model, and we get the response and present it to you. So again, the intuition, you take a pull request and all of the changes in it and create a full document. Now, again, a few best practices. So you can and probably should generate documents also on open PRs before they have been merged to the main branch. And this could also help the code reviewer. So to perform a code review, the person performing the code review could read your document and better understand your code. We've seen people use it and got very, very positive reactions to it. Another best practice is to generate docs from PRs on story PRs. That is, pull requests that actually tell a story. If the pull request only includes a part of a story, like a small change that together with other few pull requests could tell a story, then it wouldn't generate a coherent document either. So the better the pull request is, that is, the more elaborative it is, the more coherent the changes are in describing a full story, the better the resulting document would be. Another thing you can do is start from a pull request by using PR2Doc, and then you get a document, and now use AI suggestions, the feature that we introduced before. So by doing that, Swimm AI will have all the context that is already inside the document. So the text that you generated and the snippets that you generated, and provide additional suggestions for you to pick and choose. And you can take some of these suggestions, and again, they would be adapted based on code elements and based on text that you provide. So the more context you provide, the better suggestions you will get. And again, it's an interactive process, just like we said with AI suggestions. You start from a pull request. This is a single time operation. Then you get a document, but then it starts an interactive process where you modify the document and you get suggestions and so forth. And again, suggestions are for you to choose and modify. So if we talk about the initial suggestion of the entire document created from the pull request, or the different suggestions that you get afterwards by asking for additional AI suggestions, in either way, they're for you to modify, to pick, to change, to make it better. Great. So far we talked about two different features regarding creating documentation and making the process of creating documentation easier. By the way, if you haven't noticed, on the top right, you'll see that we have like breadcrumbs here. So before we were in the creating docs part, and now we move to finding docs. So a new feature that we released and we are very, very excited about is doc rules. So what are doc rules? So I'd like to start with sharing an example that is internal to us at Swimm. So this is a real pull request that was suggested within the code base that we have regarding the IDE plugin, specifically JetBrains plugin. And a developer here used a valid function in JetBrains called remove all highlighters. And Segev, one of our developers, was alert and rightfully said that calling this function might also nuke other highlighters that are unrelated to us. In other words, you shouldn't use it. It's not that it's an invalid, unsafe function in general, but for Swimm, at least, we don't want to interfere with other highlighters. So don't use this function. Now, that's a perfectly valid CR comment, right? A few days passed and another developer called that function again. So it's a different PR, a different developer. We're lucky to have Segev for this as well, who said that's not right. Doesn't this kill all other highlighters that aren't Swimm as well? So the intuition that we get from seeing this is that at least the second time could have been prevented, right? I mean, we should have had some kind of organizational knowledge saying, this is not something we do, at least on our code base. We don't call removal highlighters. What can we do then? So with this intuition, we introduced doc rules. And the idea of doc rules is to provide you with the knowledge you need right when you need it. So for example, if we take this pull request comment, what you would see here is that another developer comes and writes remove all highlighters, and they get little Segev right in their IDE saying, hey, avoid using removal highlighters as it might kill other highlighters. And if you click on that, you'll get a document explaining other best practices for developing the IDE integration of Swimm in this case. In general, doc rules are rules, and I'll show you in a minute what they actually look like, that can be triggered when you type new code or when you look at existing code. Another use case could be If there was a function that you used to call in the code base, now you have another function that is the new function, the right function. Then as you can see here, when I typed old function, I got the blue squiggly line that said, don't use old function anymore, use new function. And of course, this is a toy example, just for us to consider as an example. Another use case could be introducing new APIs or new infrastructure. So say our infrastructure team created this library with caching and specifically async cache. And we want every new person or every developer who uses async cache for the first time to see the relevant documents. So here you can see that when I type new async cache, so I create a new instance of async cache, I get prompted that there exists a relevant document, async cache, and how to use it. And again, if I click on it, I'll see the relevant document. So that's the idea behind doc rules, providing you with the relevant information right when you need it from the IDE. So how do you create useful doc rules? So one thing you can do is generate them manually, and I'd like to quickly show you how I do that. So I'll open VS Code. The process is very, very similar from JetBrains as well. And on our documentation site, you'll see explanation for both, but it looks almost identical. So here I'm going to Swimm's pane in VS Code, and we have a few different tabs here, workspace, search, and rules. So I'll go to rules and I'll click on create a rule this time because I want to start manually. So to do that, to create a rule manually, I first choose a document. So let's say I want to take a document about our Stripe integration. And I want to call it demo rule because it's just for the explanation. And as a description, I'll say, let's put an emoji. This is my message. You are calling Stripe. And now I provide a regex, so a regular expression that whenever is matched, this rule is going to be triggered. For example, let's say I'm going to use a word boundary, and then the word Stripe and another word boundary. Once I hit apply, it's already in place on my machine, at least, until, of course, I push it and someone else pulls it, just like any other code file. And let's say I go to stripe.ts now, and I'll write code that would trigger this rule. So let's say do const x is new instance of Stripe. And you see the blue line here. And the note, introduction to Stripe and charging, is the document I selected. And this is my message you're calling Stripe. That's what I wrote right there. If I click, we open the document on the right-hand side next to the code, at least by default. So this is the idea behind creating a doc rule manually. Now, to do this automatically, I could click on create a rule using AI. And now I choose a document. So again, let's choose the one about Stripe. Once I choose the relevant document, I can click on generate use case. Now, what we do here is we take the document, we analyze it, and we try to come up with the cases where you would want a developer to see this document. So we send it to the generative AI model. We're saying, I want someone to see this document when specific use cases happen. For example, now we generated these 3 use cases. One is that when a dev is working on the client-side code for Stripe integration, I want them to find this document because it mentions the main client-side code files. For example, payment.view and credit card text field.view and other examples here. Another is fetching billing configuration. So whenever a dev is working on fetching the billing configuration for Stripe integration, I want them to find this document because it discusses our cloud function, like Lambda functions. Or it could be country-specific pricing and tax rates. So when a dev does something related to the country-specific tax rate. So I want actually to see this one, but before I do that, you'll notice here that you can create without AI, as I showed you before, or just regenerate the use cases. Now going back here, let's click on fetching billing configuration. So now I told Swimm AI, I want the document to be found when someone fetches the billing configuration, and now Swimm AI will suggest the regex rules for me. So if you feel really comfortable with regex, go ahead, you can write them yourselves. If not, feel free to use Swimm AI. You may get suggestions that might be even better than what you come up with, and they might not. it's really a good starting point. Once you select one of them, say I want to take, let's just take this one. Okay. And I have a title, fetching bin configuration, with the description that we saw earlier and the regex. And of course, I can modify it and I can apply and test it like I did before when we did it for the manually created rule. So again, you can either start by create a rule the manual way or create a rule using AI, where there are two stages. One is finding the relevant use case, and the second is generating the regex. So again, you can generate rules manually. You can use AI to find rules for a specific document. One of the things that you can do with doc rules, and we've seen people do very successfully, is avoid repeating the same mistakes. So like the example I showed you before with removal highlighters, where Segev jumped in and said, hey, don't do this. There might be, of course, other examples. We heard from clients about using doc rules for avoiding a misuse of an existing function, like calling it with the wrong parameter or not validating something. So there are many different ways to use it to avoid repeating the same mistakes. When you find a really great doc rule that you love, we encourage you to share your favorite doc rules on our Swimm community Slack. I'll post a link in the last slide here. You can also find it on our website, of course, and check out our documentation site, docs.swimm.io, for various use cases. There are many examples there with rules and what they would look like in the IDE. So this was doc rules, our main feature using generative AI, or even without using generative AI, to help you find documentation when you need it most. Next, privacy and what's coming up next. So regarding privacy, we take privacy very seriously at Swimm, and with Swimm, without generative AI, we never store any of your code or your documents on our servers at any point. With AI, there is one thing to note, and that is we do send the code or some parts of your code or some parts of your documents to OpenAI. So we use OpenAI. In addition, we use other things like our own static analysis, our own knowledge about how to create effective documentation, but we do use OpenAI. So OpenAI's policy is that data is not used for training. But unlike the other features by Swimm, this is a third party, and we want to be fully transparent and explain what we're using. If you want more information within our documentation site, there is an entry exactly about that explains what we're doing, with links to OpenAI's privacy policy and data retention policy and all of their policies. We do plan on moving to a private instance on Azure. So we'll have our own private instance. It's coming up soon, and we'll of course share more information once we know exactly when it's going to happen. And so talking about what's coming up next, we are iteratively improving suggestions. So we have launched Swimm AI a week ago, but we have been working on it for a while, and a few of our clients had already used it and gave us some feedback. So we improved the suggestions, and we keep on doing this all the time. So as I mentioned, we use our own static analysis. We also use prompt engineering and some other things, and we might keep on improving. So of course, we would love to get your feedback on suggestions you get, what you liked and what you didn't like. And there are many more surprises coming up with Swimm AI. We're constantly working on improving our AI features and the empowerment of Swimm using AI. We've also seen that Swimm suggestions can improve other applications by AI, and we'll share more information about that in future webinars. So, talked about with Swimm AI. Specifically, we touched on creating documentation using AI suggestions and PR2Doc. We talked about finding documentation using doc rules with generative AI or without generative AI. We briefly discussed privacy issues and what's coming up when we look ahead. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them now and or later on our Slack community channel. I left the link here. So I see a few questions already. Will it be possible to get slides afterwards? Yes, sure. I think we would be happy to share the slides. I don't see a reason why not. Awesome. Okay, how does updates to existing code base work? Does it pull existing documentation and update them? So basically what we do again, so Swimm documents include snippets and they include tokens and other references to the code. And once you start tokens. So if I click on this now, I get to the relevant part in my IDE. At this point, if I make a change, what we do is we track the change and update you either from the IDE or the CI. So let's say I add some comments here. And just for a really simple example, of course, we deal with way more complicated examples. I would change here from get stripe product ID to get stripe products ID. And we'll click here. We'll see that Swimm auto-syncs it and provides the new suggestion. So let me zoom out a bit so you can see everything. So it provides the new suggestion and I can accept it. We do the same for tokens, so parts of lines and paths. If you do this from the CI, you will get notified that one of the documents that you have on your Swimm library is now not up to date due to the changes that have been introduced in this PR, and we will guide you to the right document and show you what needs to be fixed, or either automatically by Swimm's autosync algorithm, or we'll prompt you to step in and manually edit this part. I hope this answers the question. There are any other questions, please let me know. See people would like you connect. You're also welcome to contact me at omer@swimm.io. So I'll leave the email address here in the chat. And of course, you have the Slack community channel, and we're very happy to talk with all of our users. So please provide us with feedback, requests, and of course, we'd be happy to get into a POC like someone wrote here. So be in touch. Okay, we got one more question about API documentation. So currently, we help a few companies with their API documentation, but Swimm is not currently an API documentation first platform. So if you're interested in that, I suggest you reach out to us and I'll explain more in detail what exactly it means, where we can shine and where maybe not. Cool, thank you. Okay, great. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And we are very excited to hear your experiences from using Swimm AI. So let us know what you think.